Hello, everyone. My name is Renata. I am this parenting show host, and today I'm super excited to be here with Amy Lang from Seattle, very far away from Lithuania. Hello, Amy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show. And yes, we are very far away from each other.
Yes, thank you for being there. So you have been a sexual health educator for over 25 years. Amy also provides childhood sexual development and sexual abuse prevention training for parents, coaches, schools, caregivers. You have also written 2 books, Birds, Bees, and Your Kids, and Dating Smarts. Am I missing something?
Well, my new one.
Your new one?
Yeah, Sex Talks for Tweens. It's what to say, how to say it. Yeah, it's out. You have an old intro, so I thank you, and I'll update it. But yeah, I have a new book, Sex Talks with Tweens, What to Say and How to Say It. It's all scripts. So how to talk about birth control, this is what you say. Like how you talk about condoms specifically, this is what you can say. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna put that in the notes too. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So how did that happen, that you got into those specific topics that usually we feel very awkward and embarrassed to even think about, not even talk to our kids?
Yeah. Well, I had been a sex educator for about 16 years, and I just assumed I was going to be really great at talking to my kids when I had them. And I thought Milo was going to tell me it felt good to touch his penis, and I just freaked out. And I was so surprised by my discomfort. And so I thought, oh, you got to get a grip. This is ridiculous. So I started doing research for our family, and, figured out when to start the conversations, what they should look like. And as I was doing that, I realized I could help other parents. I have a master's degree in adult education and group facilitation. So I was like, oh, I can combine my 2 favorite things and help parents. So I did. And Milo was 6 when I started my company, and he spent most of his youth mortified by me.
I can only imagine. Yeah. How did you come up with the name Birds and Bees?
Well, I came up with birds. So this is interesting. Somebody just asked me about this. I wanted to call my company Sex Ed for Parents, but it was 2006. And so I couldn't be that edgy. And I didn't feel comfortable having the word sex in my URL or in the name of my company. So my graphic designer said, I'm like, well, what about birds and bees? And somebody, I think, had taken that already. And then she said, well, what about birds and bees and kids? And I said, okay. And here we are. So that's how I came up with the name. And, birds and bees is a euphemism for sex in English. I know not everybody has that euphemism, which is, of course, stupid because English is stupid. But yeah, it doesn't make any logical sense at all. So, but there it is. So that's how I ended up with my company name.
We have quite similar euphemism in Lithuanian. So we talk about birds when you say that birds bring, children to the family.
Yeah, the stork. Yeah.
Yeah. Or then we say that they have been left in cabbage. I don't know where cabbage. Yeah. I mean, why
we have cabbage too.
Yeah.
We have cabbage too. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. But for actual sex, we say birds and bees, like actual sex talks. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So just dive in. And how do we start? So your son was 6. So yeah. What do you say? How do you say it? It's your first time. I mean, you embarrassed yourself. You're ashamed. I remember, I don't remember the name of the course I took with you, but I do remember you had all the time through the training, you had this piece of paper and it was written breathe.
Yeah. Short.
That's what you have to do. I mean, when we talk about sex.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So before we get to the how and the when, I just want to talk a little bit about parenting and ourselves, because the first thing you need to do is really think about this in terms of prevention. That's how we used to think about it. Excuse me. We're trying to get our kids to not do it, to not have sex, we don't want them to do it too soon. We're really worried about, any kind of things going sideways. And so we're in this sort of state of mind, we're like, don't do it, don't do it. But we've changed that, and it's healthier and smarter and better for everybody. If you think about it in terms of preparation, you're preparing your kids for this really important and fundamental part of life. So for me, when I made that switch, like, oh yeah, I do want Milo to be prepared. You know, Carrie and I, my spouse and I, we really wanted him to be prepared for this. We weren't. Most people aren't. And so that's the first thing, like switch your thinking to like, how do you want your child to be prepared? And the easiest way to kind of come up with that is to think about your own experience and what did you need to be prepared. It can be highly motivating. So that's the first piece. So kind of change how you're thinking about this. The second thing is that most parents think their kids are too young to know about sex. And I'm talking about like intercourse and baby making, and then, you know, the rest of it. And that's not true. That is because we come into these conversations and we're carrying all of our baggage. We know what sex is. We've had sex. We know the good, the bad, the ugly. We know about pleasure, and we know about STIs. And so then you look at your kid, no matter how old they are, and you think, oh, no way am I talking to you about this, because you are straight up too young. And that is not true. Yes, they're too young to know everything you know, especially your own personal experience. Like nobody wants to know about their parents' sex life, right? Like, no, thank you. So if you, and we'll, you know, if you can think about like this in terms of, you know, there are pieces of that your child is not too young to know. Excuse me. Sorry about the situation here. Can you cut it out? Oh my God, I'm almost there. Okay. Sorry about all that. So this idea that they're too young, it's actually a myth. So there are pieces of things that they can know that they're not too young to know, like the correct names for their private body parts. That's the first sex talk. Like everybody has a fundamental human right to know the names for all of their private body parts. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that if you start talking sooner rather than later, then they see you as the sex expert, like you are the go-to. You also establish that these conversations are a normal part of your family life, which they should be. And, you know, like, yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable, but welcome to parenting. Since when is parenting comfortable, right? And, you know, one of my colleagues says you can do the hard work of parenting and have, you know, outcome, or you can do the hard work of parenting and have a good outcome. And so having talks about sexuality is part of having a good outcome in terms of your parenting. So like those two things, like thinking about this in terms of preparation and then getting away from this idea that they're too young. They just really are not. And in today's world, we know the more information kids have from a trustworthy adult, the better they do. They're safer from sexual abuse when they see things like pornography. They are better able to manage that. They know what to do. They know it's not okay for kids. When they're ready to be sexually active and start those first relationships, they feel more comfortable and confident because they understand consent. And if pregnancy is on the table, they know how to protect themselves from pregnancy and that kind of thing. So it's really a mindset change for us. That's like the first sex talk, right? Fix yourself. Clean it up. Look at this differently.
And actually, I remember from my own experience that talking about sex with young kids is easier when they get older, because they talk about it as they talk about, Mom, I'm hungry, or can we go and play? And when they talk in the same natural mode about sex and what does that mean and where did I come from and how is that part of my body? What's the name of, you know, my vagina or whatever it is? Yeah. So it's much easier to talk about sex with young kids. I don't feel ashamed when I do that.
Right. Like they don't know what we know. I like to think of them as like this empty vessel that we get to fill up with this really positive message. Like sex is a really good thing. It feels good. It's a great way to connect with somebody. It's a fun part of life. It's cool. Sure, there's trouble. Of course, there are potential issues and that kind of thing. But if your kid, at a young age knows that this is a good part of life, that's going to be their perspective as they get older and as they get more information. And absolutely, it is so much easier to talk to a little person because, they're super open, they're curious. And, if they think about, like, if you say, this is how butter is made and this is how a baby's made, it's the same to them. They don't know. And it's science. Right. And it's cool. They do need to know that people do this because it feels good to their grown-up bodies, that the reason they do it is because of pleasure. They're trying not to make babies like 99.99% of the time. And then you can also establish that pregnancies should be planned, right? Like pregnancy is something people plan for, and you want to get that in the door really, really early, because that will help in terms of their birth control use, being more thoughtful about if they have penis and vagina sex, like being more thoughtful about that. So yeah, it's easy and it's more fun. And, talking to a 9-year-old is harder because they're like, oh my, there's this natural aversion. They're like, oh my God, that's so gross. Don't talk to me. That's a natural aversion. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you shut up. It does not mean if they're uncomfortable, so what? So what? The safest place for them to be uncomfortable is with you. Right? It's better for them to be uncomfortable with you than to be uncomfortable on the playground and not have somebody to talk to if something comes up, or worse, if something happens to them.
I guess it's very difficult for us to be uncomfortable ourselves. I mean, it's so unnatural. I don't remember that any of my parents gave me any sex talk. So it's kind of, we are supposed to do something for our kids, but we never had an example how it's done. So it's very uncomfortable for us because we don't know how to do it. And very often when we don't know how to do it, we're so afraid of failing that we prefer to not tell anything, to not say anything, but to say something and then it's going to be wrong. And it's like, so I'm not going to do that.
Right. So it's your job to keep your kids healthy and safe. That's your job. That is your only job. It is not to give them devices. It's not to, make sure that they are, whatever. It's not even your job to make sure they're going to school per se. Like at the end of the day, that's all your only job. And talking about sexuality is a health and safety issue. If the less they know, the least safe that, the least safe they are on multiple levels. And folks who abuse children, they look for kids who are clueless, that don't have open communication with their kids. It is actually preventive if your child, like if you're at a big family meal and your child just announces to God and everyone, my penis itches, and no fun. But also if there's a predator at the table, they're going to hear that and say, I'm not messing with that kid. It's as simple as that. It's not perfect. But it's as simple as that. So, so a couple of things. So first of all, just say, I'm uncomfortable. Like you just said, my parents didn't talk to me. I don't know what I'm doing. But I want you to be ready for this part of life. I was not. I made mistakes. I want you to feel really good about it and feel good about yourself as a sexual person and in your romantic relationships. And that's enough. And then if you say something and you go and you say something and then you hear these things coming out of your mouth and you're like, oh boy, that was a mistake, then just say, I didn't say that right. Here, I'm going to say it again. Or go away. You go away and you're like, woo, that was not right. That was awkward. Go back and say that was weird and awkward here, and say it again. And say it again. That's why I wrote Sex Talks with Tweens, because people want the words. And my words aren't perfect, but they're better than no words, right? And chances, just the other thing too, is people think somehow they're going to ruin their kids. You're not. The world's going to ruin them, right? That's not on you. Like, you do everything you can, and you're not going to ruin your kids. I promise. Don't use your discomfort as an excuse. I think that's the bottom line. Don't use it as and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. And the sooner you start, the better, because little kids are very forgiving. 12-year-olds, not so much, but if you're just honest about it and keep pushing through their discomfort and your own discomfort, you're also demonstrating how to do hard things, right? They need to see that. That.
We are being an example. We are being a role model. So how do we start? Because I think what the most difficult part is being afraid that I'm gonna say something that is gonna be too much of information from that, range of age.
Yeah, it's
Or
really hard. It's really hard for most of us to give our kids too much information. So don't just take that off the
we
table.
are like always too late, almost.
Much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. So your goal is sweaty upper lip. So if you have a sweaty upper lip, you're probably hitting it, right? So yeah, don't worry about too much information. It's really hard for us to do this because like I didn't have what I needed. And even if you do think you've given your kid too much information, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're not going to harm them. Now, depending on how you deliver the information, that's one thing that could be bothersome or hard on them, but don't worry about that. You're asking about how you start the conversation. So the easiest way to start the conversation is to just get a book, especially with kids who are 7 and under, and just say, hey, here's this book. It's all about bodies and families and how babies are made. Let's read it. Most folks are already reading in their families. It's a normal part of their family life. So you just throw that in and they aren't going to notice you and your anxiety so much because they're going to be focused on the book. And if you do start to get anxious, just say, poof, this is all new to me. I forgot about all this. I'm feeling a little funky about it. Like you can just call it out or they're not going to notice. You don't even need to do that. So that's with the 7 and under. With like 8 and under, 8, 7, 8 and under. With a kid that's over 8 or 9, then you need to have one conversation where you say, you know what, I've just been thinking that you are old enough for us to start talking about how your body's going to change when you get older, talk about sex and how families come to be and relationships and dating and all that stuff. And then say, we're going to get some books and we're going to start talking about this stuff. And that's it. That's it. And then you've kicked the door open and then you can say, hey, I got you this book. Or, hey, remember when I said that, at 9, kids should know everything that's going to happen in terms of puberty. So you can say, hey, your body's going to start to change, right? And kid body's going to grow up into an adult body. It could be a funky time. Your body's going to feel weird. Different things are going to happen. Like you can just briefly say, like, if you're a person with ovaries, your breasts are going to develop. They might feel sore. The first thing you'll notice is your nipples kind of stick out. You start to get pubic hair, talking about the period, that kind of thing. As a lean in, it's a pretty good place to start with kids who are sort of in the 9-year-old range, but they have to know the other pieces. And like you said, like, oh boy, right, talking to an older kid. But one of the things you can say to them is it is really cool to be the smartest kid on the playground when it comes to this stuff. Really cool. Like, for example, so Milo, we had sex ed starting in 5th grade. So I, of course, was just very excited to know, like, what happened? How's it going? But I kept my cool for about 3 days. We're walking home from school and I said, so how's the sex ed going? And he said, oh, mama, the questions these kids have. And I said, it must feel pretty good to have all that information before they did. And he said, yep. And then I said, what kinds of questions do they have? And he's like, I'm not telling you that. So there you go. So he puffed up, like he actually he stood up straighter. So, that should be the goal for your kid. They should know pretty much everything by the time they're 12. And, especially now because of so much problems online and the stuff they're seeing online. And it is impacting them. It's impacting how they think about themselves as a sexual person. It's impacting how they think about sex. And it's really not healthy at all or okay for kids to see that. I don't need to say that, right? I know you all know that, right? That's not new news. But it is more imperative now than it has been in the past. I mean, really imperative that you just get on it and not be afraid.
What if they say no? I mean, those older kids, if they push you away, if they say, I know it all, mom, I know it, just, I'm not having that conversation, because you can't force someone to have a conversation. You can only talk, but what if they leave the room?
So you can say, yeah, but I don't know what you know. and I'm not going to be really comfortable. Like, I need to, you need to hear from me. You might have you might think, but there's all kinds of misinformation out there. And I just want to make sure you're smart about this. So yeah, I get it. You're uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. So here's the deal. I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes. You don't have to say a word to me. I just ask you to listen. And then set the timer. So you have to plan a little maybe, right? And then you say the thing, keep an eye on them. And when the timer goes off, say, I have more to say. If you're interested, they might say, okay, or they might say no. And then you have to say, have you heard that before? Heard this before? What do you think? You have to give them an opportunity to talk to you. Even if they don't. For the run screaming from the room people, you have to be really more sneaky. So that means you need to kind of use the world around you to have the conversations and just say things like, oh my God, I just heard this news report about this 14-year-old person that's got pregnant. I hear that and it's really hard on me, and I'm sure it's been hard on her. There's this thing called birth control, and this is how it works. It prevents people from becoming pregnant. So you're just having this sort of fake casual conversation. And they can't close their ears. So that's the other thing. I mean, I know now they can, but they really can't close their ears, right? Another tactic with those folks is to say, hey, you know what? I need to have like a sex talky thing with you. So we can do it now or we can do it later. They always say later. And then you need to do it within 48 hours. And you just say, okay, it's later. And then you do the thing. Really important to keep it short. Also really important to try to have the conversation when you're doing something else. So again, it feels casual. If you have younger kids that are like, usually the older kid is the one that's like, hell no. If you have a younger kid, like 2 years age difference, just use the younger kid to get at the older kid. So have a conversation in front of the older kid with the younger kid. And again, you're not going to hurt anybody because it's you. Right? It's you, and it's you sharing your values, right? So you're not going to hurt anybody. And it's going to be helpful in the long run. Like they might not like it in the moment. And you can say that you may not like this right now, but trust me when I tell you, when sex is on the table and your friends are doing stuff, you're going to feel better and you're going to do better. Right? So just be explicit about that. And, by the time they're 12, they really do need to know the basics of everything. So they need to know about orgasms and pleasure and consent and STIs and birth control. They need to know about the different ways people have sex. They need to know all the things, because once they get to that age, 12, 13, that's it. Talk about everything. Kids are having sex and doing sexual things. So they have to be really prepared for that, even if they're not doing it. Like, again, like being the smartest kid in the friend group is great. It's great.
Yeah.
It makes it empowering.
Yeah, I love that part about casual conversation. It's like you talk, you use the right vocabulary, you say all the right things, but then you pretend that it's not intended for them. It's like you talk to either a younger sibling, or then you describe something that happened to a neighbor or something you read in a newspaper, but still you use that opportunity to use the right vocabulary to tell all the right things, so that they can hear that at least.
Yeah. And your values too, right? Like you heard my values, like, I'm not good with people who are 14 having sex, but sometimes that happens. It's a big decision to make. There are health impacts, and, what I hope for you is that you wait until what we said to Milo was you're in a loving, committed relationship. You have open communication, that you really know, like, this is the right time and the right person for me. And that they think that too, right? So we're planting those seeds of consent. Like it's a yes for everybody. The other thing too is don't make eye contact, especially with the penis havers. They do not do very well with the eye contact thing. Like they are not down for that. So, one other tactic is to like be in the car, right? That's why the doing something else thing. Like I told Milo about female circumcision on a bike ride. Because there was exactly this. There was we were listening to the radio. There was a story about female circumcision, because he and his best friend are in the car. They're in the back seat. And I'm like, oh, I could tackle this now, but it felt like too much with Ethan there. I mean, I think his parents would have been fine, but I was also like, okay, I got to talk about this. And so I said to him, hey, you know, there's something I want to talk to you about. That's a sex thing. So we can do it now. We can do it later. A couple of days later, we're on a bike ride and I was like, hey, remember? And I'm like, we're riding, I'm talking about female circumcision. And he had great questions. He was more likely to talk to me, right? Because he was warned and he was more open to it.
How, because you mentioned earlier about pregnancy and then protection. Usually we as parents are very much afraid that if we talk about protection and if we say how to use that, that's gonna push them, you know, into sexual relationship. It's like, you know, putting, I don't know, somewhere in the house, like condoms. It's like saying, go and do that.
No, it's not. Providing information is not giving permission. Right. And if your kiddo does decide to have sex and they have a penis, they absolutely need to have condoms. Right. People with penises are fertile 24/7. Those of us with ovaries, we're like 3 days a month. Right. So they don't take it as giving permission, because you say, look, I am not telling you to go out and get busy. But what I'm telling you is that if you decide to do that, you need to be safe and protect yourself and you protect your partner. Now, ideally, you will tell me, and I might be upset because I wanted you to wait longer. But at the end of the day, I want you to feel good about your decision making and to be protected, right? There's no permission giving. That's not permission giving. And again, health and safety. They don't interpret that. I mean, we've had condoms in our house forever, and Milo, of course, would not touch them. But he's very, very private. But they were there and his friends knew they were there. And, you know, I didn't care. I wanted everybody to be safe. I didn't want my child getting an STI or, you know, having a pregnancy happen. And that is a big values choice, right? That is a big values thing. But again, you can't control them. You cannot control them. And it's better for them to be able to protect themselves without having to try, like they can just take care of it, than it is for them to wing it. But again, that's a family choice. You know, it's a personal choice thing, but they do not interpret being given information as being given permission at all.
How did that happen, that part about condoms in your house? Did you just say to your child, you know, it's there, the day you need them and you made a decision, it's yours? And
yeah, like they're there if you need them, if your friends need them.
How old was he when you said that?
Middle school. Yeah, middle school, 12 or 13. So he had older friends. And like I said, they were not touched because he would not. I mean, he told me he'd rather talk to strangers than me or his dad. It was great. It was great. Yeah. So that's what I was dealing with, which made us really sneaky with the conversations, right? And then having lots of resources for them, healthy resources like books. There are a couple of websites. Amaze.org has wonderful videos for kids. There's another one, Everybody Curious. These are classroom style. So like sex ed classroom, really, really great, fun, engaging. Those are for kids who are like 10, 11, 12, along in that age range. So having those resources available to them is safer, and it's easier than you having to be constant stream, right? Like, I don't even know everything. So yeah, I mean, I think that I think that learning more, like going to Everybody Curious, watching those videos as an adult, you're going to learn more and you're going to feel more comfortable because you're going to see what's happening, see how they talk, that kind of thing. And then I do have an online resource called the Birds and Bees Solution Center, which has videos about specifically how to have the conversations, what's age appropriate, you know, puberty, and very like really micro things like how do you talk about condoms and that kind of thing. So there's another place for you to learn. But I don't do like the sex ed piece of it per se, right? Like not in detail. But yeah, so you can teach yourself some, and the more you know, you'll feel better. Like, you know, I don't think knowledge is, I think knowledge is empowering, right? Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is empowering. So if you're empowered with this information, just like your kid empowered with the information, you're going to feel better when you're like, hey, you know, this is how you get pregnant, right? No troubles, like, right? These are all the ways somebody can get pregnant. So, you know, I think like take a breath, right? Take a breath. It's fun. You can be fun and funny, right? It's not all gloom and doom. So for example, I haven't said the word penis to Milo since he was probably 5. I say junk, down there, tinkle waggle, tallywhacker, business. Like I just say all these euphemisms because I know he knows and it lightens the mood. Now, if it was something serious, I would say like, so if somebody has herpes, what you can see is this little tiny kind of spot on their penis. So I might say penis then, but the rest of the time, boner, the whole, go all the way. Boobs, butt, you can be slangy. It's fine.
I love how you link both the sexual education to safety. What about online business? Because nowadays, all the kids from a very young age, they are online, and then there's no so much protection there. And they can also, it's not about only sex, it's also about, pornography and all that stuff that they can see there.
It's all about pornography. It's all about pornography. At least from my perspective. So yeah, there are ways to protect kids online. One of the big ways is to talk openly with them about sexuality, so their curiosity is reduced, and to be really clear that the internet is not the place to get your sex ed questions answered, unless you go to this safe website, this safe website, this safe website. But kids just Google boobs. And if you want a little homework, Google boobs and see how long it takes you to get to really graphic pornography. And kids think that porn is real sex. They think people's, when you talk with them, you say that is not real sex. People don't do those things. They don't sound like that. They don't, their bodies don't look like that. These people are actors. And it's really not safe or okay for you to see that. It can really kind of mess you up. And yeah, it can be stimulating, but it's completely not healthy. And so talking openly about pornography and pornography exposure is really important. And to tell them it's a thing, and to tell them like, hey, you can see videos of naked people or people having sex online. And the rule is that you need to stop looking, come find me. You won't be in trouble. Just need to make sure you're okay. So you're calm and you're clear, because they're going to see it accidentally usually, right? A kid shares a link with them, shows it at school on their phone, right? And I just taught a class the other night, and I said, how many of you know a kid who's been porn exposed? And there were like 30 people, and 3 people raised their hands. And I said, no, every one of you put your hand in the air. You all know a child who's been porn exposed. And so our heads are very much in the sand about this. But I just imagine if you were 10, and when you were 10, and you didn't have somebody filling you in, and you didn't have resources. I would have been Googling blowjobs, right? I would have been Googling all kinds of stuff. And so, this reduction in curiosity because of the sex talks. So you said that, that you can't, like you can use parental controls. You can, like on every single device your kid can access the internet on, you should have the parental controls enabled. I know you have an international community. There's a product called Custodio, which I'll send you the link to. That is something that you install on your router, and then you put on all the devices. It's great because you have one app that tells you where everybody's going online. You're monitoring, so you're watching where they're going. You're filtering out search terms. It's not perfect, but it's part of what you can do. So again, we're back to safety, right? So I just had somebody say that her friend, what did she say? She was having a conversation with another mom, and she said to the mom, so what are y'all doing about, online stuff? And the mom said, well, they're going to see it, so why bother? You can Google how to kill yourself, right? You can Google how to shoot up fentanyl. Exactly. You can Google anything. It's not just the porn, but for me, it's all the porn. So it is your responsibility to make sure your kids are safe online. So one of the ways I think about it is this, like you would never let your kid get in the car without a seatbelt. Never, ever. Same thing. They could die if they don't wear a seatbelt. Now they're not going to die because of the internet, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
What if they go to other houses? What if they go and see their friends and they have know this policy, you know, like you can control your devices at home, but if they leave the house and they go to see their friends and their friends don't have any parental control.
So what I did was I said, I mean, things were different, right? Milo's 22. What I recommend you do is you say, hey, we're really concerned about, just say porn exposure, you know, it's happening all the time and other stuff and our kids being safe online, and say, what are you doing to keep, what parental controls are you using? What do you have in place? Don't say, are you? Don't say, do you? Say what? And then watch them. And if they're like, oh, well, you know, like this gal, we're going to see it anyway. And so you can say, you know what? I know this sounds like paranoid stuff, but I'm just going to ask that the kids are not online while they're here. And I know that seems weird. And, you know, you can do that. It's easier when the kids are younger. When they're older, you need to ask that question, because then what you're doing is a little parent-led sex ed. You're planting a seed that this is not safe, right? And then, and you can say, well, you know, we obviously I'd prefer that they aren't online, but you know, if they're gaming or whatever, that's cool. So just say the thing, and then you have an open relationship with your kid, and you're like, hey, how'd that go? What kinds of things did you do? Did you see anything freaky? Like, you know, you won't be in trouble, just curious, right? And then the other thing to do is to make your house the home where kids want to come and hang out.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And one thing I did with Milo, when his friend, when he was little, my rule was no screens for 3 hours. After 3 hours, they could do one thing. Like video game, watch a movie, like that.
I remember my son came from school one day and he was, Mom, I had this kid who tried to show me something on his phone. And so I asked him, so did you watch? And he was, I know what you told me, but then I didn't know how to say no because I was afraid that they're not gonna hang out with me anymore. You know, when you have other kids like going and like, hey, watch that. And what you're gonna say? No, my mom said I'm not supposed to do that. You feel embarrassed. You feel like, of course, you want to fit.
Yeah. So a couple things is they can say, oh, God, my mom would kill me if she found out I was looking at something like this. She has crazy radar. They can say, if it's porn, my favorite is, dude, I think looking at porn is a solo activity. And do some snark, right? They can say, oh yeah. Yeah, seen it. And then if they have a phone, say, have a queued up go-to video. It's like, have you seen this ridiculous thing? Oh my God, this is so fucking funny. And I'm all about the swears, right? Just tell them to swear, whatever it takes to get them out of it. And then have them role play with you. Sorry, can I say that? You have to bleep me. Right, sorry. So it just give them, and then role play with you. Let's practice here. I'm going to show you a cooking video, right? And then you practice saying, you know, my mom would kill me, or like, whatever, I've seen it. No, thanks. Yeah, I've been there, done that. Like any kind of, even if it's a lie, it's fine. Like, been there, done that. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Okay, whatever. And then a shaming thing too. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? We could totally get in trouble for this. What are you doing? Are you nuts? If they see that, we're going to be in serious trouble. So throwing people under the bus. And again, he's going to need to practice. He's going to need to practice with you so he can try it out. And his friends are uncomfortable too. He's not the only one. But the big thing about if an adult sees us doing this, we're going to get in so much trouble, and my mom will kill me, right? That's a good lead in too, right? Adults see this, my mom finds out, she will kill me. So you throw you under the bus. So it's rough, right? It is so hard not to look, and you don't want the friends. And if they do that, they're not gonna think there's something wrong with him, right? They're still going to be friends with him. And he threw them a little safety net. So tell them that, right? Your friends don't want to be looking at this either. Trust me, right? They might pretend, but they know. Yeah,
that's what we did. They were very much into Pokemon games. So we find some Pokemon videos that he showed them instead. Like, have you seen that last video that just was put on YouTube? He also showed them cards, like the new cards he had of Pokemon, and yeah, he kind of tricked that out of the situation.
Perfect. Perfect. And it worked, right?
Yeah, it was, but you have to be prepared. I mean, you are not even prepared for that. You think about all that stuff, and then they come back from school with that situation. It's like, oh crap, I didn't even think about that. You know, that about the social
right.
With your
so
friends.
the other, speaking of crappy piece of this is that somebody needs to tell an adult that child is doing that. And that's you.
Yeah.
You need to tell school. This kid's doing this.
Parents.
And your kid doesn't need to know that it was you. Don't tell him, but you need to tell. That child needs help, right? That child should not be looking at that. Should not be looking at that. And, you know, you don't know the family structure. You don't know whatever is going on there, but that child should not be showing people that, and that child needs help. So you need to go tell the school administration that this has been happening. But sneak.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Because you are a mom too, so what is the most difficult part of motherhood for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, because Milo was so private, it was not knowing. It was not knowing if any of our parenting was having any kind of impact. That was really hard for me. Trusting that what we were doing was the right thing. We parented differently than our friends, and I was pretty damn convicted, but also like, is this the right thing? Is this kid going to turn out okay? But I think all that piece of not knowing, it's hard. He's still very private. My friend tells me that in 2 more years, he will have full brain development and he will talk to me again. But he seems to be very well adjusted and happy and healthy and in a healthy relationship. So, but yeah, that uncertainty, right, about all of it was really, I think, probably the hardest part of parenting for me.
It's hard not knowing, not having the proof. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can you just tell a little bit more where people can find you?
Yes, of course. So both Instagram and Facebook are at Birds, Bees, Kids. And then my website, birdsandbeesandkids.com. And there's a freebie there that's 7 tips to help you have really great conversations. So if you download that, you'll get on my newsletter list, and then you will get this very robust handout. So those are the best places. Oh, and I have a podcast. It's called, it's called Just Say This, and it's all Q&A. So people call, leave me a voicemail with a question, and then I answer it on the show.
Very cool. I'm going to put all of that into the notes. Thank you very much, Amy, for your time and everything you share. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you for trusting me with your people. I really appreciate it.
Bye.